Section 4, understanding the products we measure. So having looked high level at various pieces of equipment, here we're going to get started on, I guess, the basis of our business, which is measuring liquor inventory. And so we're going to discuss here the different products, all the different varieties, and some of the characteristics of the different categories and kind of how we organize them. So without further ado, so to date, I guess high level understanding, we have a master list that stores all of these products, and we arrange all the different products in that master list into 5 main categories. To date, there's about, I think, 12,000 products in the system. But said the 5 categories to start with are draft beer, bottled beer, liquor, and wine. Should be pretty self-explanatory. And then each category has various subcategories. So this is, in the case of wine, the subcategories are red wine, white wine, port, and champagne. In the liquor category, the categories are things like vodka, gin, shop products, whiskey, scotch, that sort of thing. So I said subcategories, 5 of them, and then with each of those, there's subcategories that further divide those. So let's jump in and think a little bit here about draft beer. So keg sizes, there's basically 4 types or 4 sizes of kegs, and strangely one of them comes in 2 different shapes. As the quarter kegs can be 2 different sizes, it's important you learn to recognize these at a glance. So the default size for the category, and we'll have more on that, but each category, like draft beer in this case, has a size which is most common. And in the case of draft beer, the most common keg size is half barrel kegs. They're 15.5 gallons. The reason they're called half barrels is they're literally half the size of barrels that used to be used way back in the day. But said the half barrel is a bit confusing, but really it's a full size keg. It's called a half barrel. Then the next size, if you have import kegs, Stella would probably be the most common one you're going to see here. But the imported kegs typically are a little bit smaller. It's just a different size. Annoyingly, they're small enough or similar in size enough that they're easy to get confused with, but after you get used to this, you'll be easily able to tell the difference. But if you look at them, they're 13.2 gallons. They're a little bit shorter and they're a little bit skinnier. So you'll come to notice that. The next size down is quarter barrel kegs. Obviously, a quarter barrel keg is half the size of a half barrel keg. And these are the weird ones that come in 2 different shapes. So 2 different shapes of quarter barrel kegs, both contain the same quantity of beer. The fat pencil style keg is basically the same height as a regular half barrel keg, but it's skinnier. And then pretty rare are the short regular diameter kegs. So if you think about the size of the circle on top of a keg, but then half the height, that would be the short keg style for the quarter barrels. Maybe difficult to imagine, you can look it up online, but it will make sense when you see those. And then finally, the 6th barrel kegs, the sixtels, sometimes people call them. They're obviously a third the size of the half barrel kegs. They typically are exactly the same height as the half barrels, but they're much skinnier. So the most common types of kegs you'll see, are these half barrel, quarter barrel, and 6th. They're all the same height, and they just get skinnier and skinnier as they reduce in size. Probably enough chat on that. We'll get into more detail when we get counting. So as I mentioned, the default size for kegs is half barrel kegs. That means when we're naming a type of beer, if the keg is in that default size, that half barrel size, then the name of the product won't be included. So it will just say, for instance, keg Coors Light. So if it's keg Coors Light because it's in the draft beer category, the default size is half a barrel. If it doesn't specifically list the size of the keg, then you know it's that default size, which in this case would be half barrel. Conversely, if we had a sixth barrel keg of Coors Light, then the name of the product, both the vessel and the product name, would include 6th, so that you knew the correct size for that. Then the draft beer subcategories, there's actually not very many. There's only 3 in this case. In liquor there's a lot more, but we break them up into 3 different things. So we've got domestics, things like Budweiser, Coors Light. Premiums, any sort of craft brewery, any nicer things like Fat Tire is a good one. Sam Adams, Lagunitas IPAs, and anything that's basically not from one of those giant breweries that just sell sort of inexpensive beers that often are heavily promoted. You know, PBRs and other domestics that the hipsters and I like to drink. Um, and then finally, we have imports. Pretty simple. Anything that comes imported. So it might be Dos Equis from South. It might be Stella. It could be Newcastle. But anything which is imported is going to be in the import category. And those kegs typically are in those 13.2 gallon sizes. Not actually the Mexican kegs like Dos Equis, but yes, the European kegs, so like the old school beers and things like Stella for sure are going to be in those 13.2 gallon Euro kegs. Quick note on rubber kegs, not very common. PBR is an example, but sometimes you'll see kegs which are rubberized on the outside. They have, rather than obviously the aluminum shell, they've got the aluminum shell, and then outside of that they're coated in black rubber. PBR kegs are the most common of these. They are, just be aware of them because you can't use the keg check tool on them. We'll have more on that, but the keg check tool is the sort of speed saver tool we use for weighing kegs. You can't do it if there's rubber on the outside. It will not work correctly. More on that. So the keg check is really useful. It's much quicker to weigh kegs. It also stops you having to lift tapped kegs down because you can balance them on top of each other and still get reasonably accurate measurements. But the only downside of the keg check is you're only able to use it on the biggest two sizes of kegs, which are those half barrel kegs and the Euro size kegs. Actually, the good news is that covers 90% of kegs, but as the craft beer industry is getting bigger and bigger, increasingly we're seeing more and more of those quarter and 6 barrel kegs, and you cannot use the keg check on those two types of keg. Final word, if the kegs are badly damaged, again, we'll get into this when you do your training, but if the keg check works by measuring the rotational force when you tick the keg up onto its edge, and so if the edge of the keg is damaged, or if you're not on a flat surface, a flat concrete floor, you're going to have trouble, and again, you would have to weigh those kegs to be accurate. And then finally, the unsuitable half barrel kegs. Sometimes Pacifico is very strange, but Pacifico kegs don't sit on the edge. At the bottom of the keg, there's this like mini circle, and they sit on this mini circle. It means that they're not pivoting from the widest point of the keg. Again, it would make more sense if I showed you in detail or showed you in person, but don't be careful about Pacifico kegs. They sometimes are not suitable to be weighed using the keg check. So moving on to our next category is bottled beer. Bottled beer is really simple because there's no weighing required. A bottled beer is either it has the lid still on it, in which case we count it, or if it's the lid off, someone's hopefully drinking it, or if not, you might as well not bother counting it because it's going to be wasted. The other thing to note is that all of the other categories, we enter the invoices and we count the things in units. So for instance, for kegs, we enter 1 keg was delivered, and when we're counting the kegs, we're doing, hey, this is a full keg, or this is the weight, and it calculates this a half keg. Whereas with the bottled beers, when we enter the invoices, we deal with cases. So if you've seen an invoice, you see 2 cases of Bud Light, then you'd enter 2, and it will obviously figure out that was 48 bottles. But when you're counting bottles, you're going to count the individual bottles. So that means when you come up to a full case of beer, it's 24. If there's 2, it's 48. Don't put 1 or 2 for the cases because you'll be entering 1 or 2 bottles. Typical sizes, 12 ounces is obviously the most common size of bottled beer, and that's our default size. So similarly, if it's a 12-ounce bottle, it won't list the size after the name. Other common ones are 16-ounce bottles, 24-ounce bottles, the sort of pounder cans, and also, cans. Bottled category includes both cans and bottles. Obviously, everything is by default is a bottle, so if it's a can, then it also will list can afterwards. And again, of course, cans are becoming more popular. So case sizes, by far the most common is 24. The big 22-ounce bombers and some very expensive beers will sometimes come in 12 packs. There is some strange European beers that come in 20 packs. Japanese large beers like Sapporo and Kirin, they come in cases of 15. That's quite rare, but again, if you're dealing with a Asian concept restaurant, you're almost certainly going to run into those. And then some of the lower end stuff, my favorite PBR, that comes in 30 packs. Typically, you only see the lower end beers like Coors Light, PBR coming in 30 packs, but be aware of all of those. And as always, if in doubt, pull it out, read the box, see how many are in that case so you can be correct. Similar to the draft beer subcategories, similar to the draft beer categories, we just have 3: domestic, premium, and import. Should be self-explanatory. Beware of 4-packs. Obviously, in general, cases of beer comes in 6-packs. Sam Smith beers and some higher-end beers, sometimes some double IPAs that are very high alcohol and therefore expensive, they'll come in 4-packs. So just be aware of the existence of 4-packs, because if you just see packs of beer and presume there's 6 of them, obviously you'll miscalculate. Another little thing I've just thought of while I'm talking about this is sometimes Budweiser will sell 24-pack standard cases of beer, but you get a slight cost break if they don't come with cardboard 6-packs. It's kind of annoying from our perspective. It's harder to move around, but ultimately if they can save $1 or $2 ordering them without the 6-pack, sometimes they don't come in 6-pack and they're just kind of 24 bottles loose. Naming conventions, this is a little bit more confusing on bottled beer. So as we said, the default size is a 12-ounce bottle. So if it says Bud bottle, that's a 12-ounce bottle. If the size is different from 12 ounces, and or if it's not in a bottle, it's a can, then the different size and or the word can will be included. So should be explanatory. Said Bud bottle on its own would be a 12-ounce bottle. Bud can would be a 12-ounce can. And if it was both a different size and a can, then it will list both a different size and it. So for instance, Bud 16-ounce can obviously would indicate that it's not a bottle and it's not the default size also. Quick word on 6-packs grabbing. This might again be shown in practice, but if you're in a cooler and there's lots of 6-packs sort of stacked closely together, often you're going to have to pull out the top level. If they're double stacked and there's 2 layers of beers, you're going to have to pull up the top layer of 6-packs to make sure that there's not missing bottles of beer below. And when you do this, when you pick up the 6-packs, sometimes the jagged edges of the bottle tops from a nearby 6-pack will grab on the 6-pack. And so when you pull the 6-pack up, you'll also grab a stray bottle along with it. You need to be careful about that, because what will happen is you'll pick the 6-pack up, it will drag this single bottle with it, and then it's only hanging on by the edge, and it will drop and you'll smash a beer bottle all over a cooler, and you'll just create 45 minutes of work cleaning that up. So be careful of those. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, then let us have you show you in person. Okay, moving on to liquor. Just to say it, of course, our wheelhouse mainly, we have high-end, we have low-end things, but typically the sort of bars we're dealing with is kind of your sports bars. And typically those bars are going to do most of their volume in draft beer and liquor. So those are the 2 categories really that we see most sales in and are most critical for our clients. Not in all cases, higher end places do a lot of wine. But anyway, liquor category, of course, the default size is that bar liter. That's somewhat specific to the United States actually, but the bar liters is typical. So again, the names of liquor bottles won't include liter because it's the default. But the next most common, and it is pretty common in Europe, is 750 milliliter bottles. So if it was, an Islay malt, whatever it might be, Lagavulin, it will say Lagavulin 750 because it's not that default liter size. And what you'll find is that higher end products is always in 750s. The higher end whiskies, tequilas typically do not exist in liter bottles. And then rarely some bars will have handles or 1.75 liter bottles. Those are sometimes used in automatic dispensing systems. Sometimes they'll technically illegally use them to fill up the other bottles. We're not going to go tattletale on our clients, but ultimately we accommodate whatever they do, but they need to watch themselves if they're doing that. Spotting sizes. So you're probably aware at this point that we have a mapping system with our software, meaning that we set up the bar one time, we scan all the barcodes, and then each time the software loads, it presumes items are in the same order as before. The one kind of maybe weakness of that system is it makes it very fast, but if we previously scanned a liter bottle and then they replaced it for whatever reason with a 750 milliliter bottle, Espolon Silver Tequila is one that we've been noticing this with recently, but sometimes they'll replace the liters for 750s because they weren't available or whatever, and it's important that you pay attention because the map will just say Espolon, meaning that previously it was a liter, and then if you pick a bottle at 750, you need to become quick at recognizing the difference between a liter and a 750. After counting for a while, you'll do it instantly. But one of the weaknesses of our system certainly is that if you don't pay attention to sizes and they switch between the two, it'd be easy for you to enter the wrong size, and obviously you'll get all sorts of funny results if you do that. If in doubt, the rule, as always, is to scan the vessel barcode, because then it will just look it up instantaneously. You shouldn't have a problem. The subcategories for liquor include quite a lot. They should be self-explanatory. We start with shot products. They're sorted to the top of the list because they are products that we see missing an awful lot. These are products which are pretty much only served as shots. So we're talking about Jaeger, Rumpelminz, Goldschlager, and a few others. We put them right at the top of our list because they're often products that are missing. Next up in order, vertical order in our reports is vodka, self-explanatory. Also gin and rum. So we're kind of going clear to dark in terms of the colours here. Then we have whiskey. Strangely, we include Irish whiskey into whiskey. We may change that at some point. We do break out Scotch as a separate category. Next up, we have tequila. Obviously, there are 4 different types of tequila, if you're not aware of that. The cheap stuff, Cuervo is the #1 selling tequila. Cuervo Gold is the #1 selling tequila in the world. It's actually not the greatest type of tequila. So there's the base level is gold, and then the next one is silver or blanco, depending if they're using the English or the Spanish word, and then reposado and añejo. Gold tequila is the least expensive. What they do here is they mix basically 51% tequila with other cheaper grain spirits. So it's still majority tequila, but the rest is crap. It's why you get supposedly hangovers from gold tequilas. But anyone that's serious about tequilas would kind of turn their nose up at a gold tequila, definitely lower end of the spectrum. But any of the nicer tequilas are typically going to have a sort of a family arrangement where they'll have the silver, reposado, and añejo will all be in the same shaped bottle. They'll have different color labels. They're easily confused because the labels will all look the same. Often the only differentiation is the word blanco, reposado, or añejo. So very important for you to pay attention to those, know the difference. And you can read up about this, but the only difference between the silver/blanco, the reposado, and the añejo, they are all the exact same liquid, but the reposado and the añejo have been aged in barrels, which gives it their darker color. So typically you'll see the silver or blanco is clear liquid, the reposado has a slight coloration to it, and the añejo will be the darker, almost like a light brown or amber color sometimes. They're kind of booby traps here because it's very easy to mix up the reposado, añejo, and blanco, so pay attention to that. Next category we have is after dinner. We're not always the tightest here, but anything which is predominantly drunk after dinner, such as brandies, cognac, grappers, they will be in this category. Most of these things are higher end, so come in 750s, but because the default size for the liquor category is litre, these will always ideally have the word 750 after them. Hennessy is an example actually that does come in litres and 750s, so you'll have Hennessy 750 for the 750 version or Hennessy for the litre version. The next subcategory is branded. We always use the word Midori, or use the example of Midori here to explain. So, as you hopefully know, Midori is a melon-flavored liqueur. You can also buy generic versions of Midori by like DEK or Mr. Boston, and they are kind of unbranded. But Midori is a branded version. It's going to cost at least $20 a bottle, and it has its own brand, Midori. So anything that has its own dedicated brand and the bottle will be different shapes and it will have a specific label, they are using branding on that bottle. A lot of liqueurs and this is the catch-all category, so a lot of products randomly end up in the branded category. But the difference said between the branded and the next category, sugar, is whether these products are branded, whether they're sort of making an effort to kind of differentiate themselves. Looking at the next category, sugar, these are all the generic unbranded liqueurs, typically by brands like De Kuyper, Mr. Boston, Hiriam Walker, and Arrow. These products typically cost about $9, $10 per bottle. And the thing you'll notice here is that if they've got, for instance, a raspberry version and a melon-flavored liqueur, the bottles ultimately will look basically the same, and they'll just say, raspberry liqueur or melon liqueur, and have different color labels, but they'll basically look the same. So important to understand the difference in those. And then finally, energy. You're wondering why on earth we put a non-alcoholic drink like Red Bull or Monster into our energy category. Well, the reason is that most bars consider the energy drinks as part of the liquor category because they're typically mixed with liquor. So Red Bull obviously often goes with vodka or with Jaeger, and so we were asked by clients to put this into the liquor category, so we've done that. Confusing flavors. Grey Goose is a good example here, but similarly to we talked about the different reposado, etc., and tequilas, with the craziness of all the different flavors of vodkas, there's basically just booby traps or bottles which look very, very similar, and you really have to pull them out and pay them attention. Often you'll see a line of Grey Goose bottles. The pear and the citron vodka look very, very similar. Especially if you look at them just from the top. If you're looking at the top of the bottle, maybe if you're in the liquor storage area. So it's important when you're dealing with Grey Goose, you must pull out all the bottles of Grey Goose and make sure which flavors you're dealing with. Similarly, Sky has multiple flavors, different colors. It's easy to tell I think it's the passion fruit and the something else fruit that have a pink ring around the top, but be very mindful about the different colors and flavors of bottles. You'll have to pay attention and make sure that you tell the difference, and if you're not absolutely sure, if in doubt, pull it out, look at them carefully. If after looking carefully you still can't tell the difference, get out your trusty barcode scanner and it will do the hard work for you, because obviously it will have those different ones. Sorry, this is a long video. It's important stuff. Obviously the basis of our business is counting alcohol, so we need to understand this. So finally here, let's run through wine quick as we can. So wine, obviously the most common size is 750. Sometimes you'll get those larger bottles, 1.5 liter, relatively rare. And then increasingly, you're starting to see some liter bottles, some liter boxes. Again, similar to beer, is starting to be a bit more of a choice. Beer always used to be in bottles. Now a lot of good beers come in cans. Similarly, there's a bit of a trend where some nicer bottles of wine or some nicer wines are starting to be found in liter boxes, or sometimes in 3-liter boxes. Honestly, the 3-liter ones tend to be the lower end of the market. 9 times out of 10 when you find 3-liter boxes or bagged wine, they'll actually be kitchen wine, and they'll be used for cooking rather than to serving to customers, but often they might be used for sangria or things that are used behind the bar. So if it's wine, if in doubt, obviously ask them, check it out, but you'll see all those different sizes. The subcategories for wine are easy: white, red, champagne, port, and sake. Hope you understand that. Similarly, naming convention, we're presuming everything is a 750 milliliter bottle. So if its size is different from 750, it will be noted in the name. And then if it's in a box, it will say box after. So example, Barefoot Cabernet Sauvignon 3-liter box obviously indicates Barefoot CS for Cabernet Sauvignon indicates the like the flavor or the varietal. And then it's not 750, it's 3-liter, so we have that there. And obviously have a box because it's not a bottle. Wine varietals. It's important to understand what the heck we're talking about with these. If you're not aware that there's a difference between a Pinot Noir and a Cabernet Sauvignon, then you need to read up on wine pretty quick, because this is important. Basically what those different words mean is they come from different types of grape, and they're all different red grapes, but they're all they're different. They're grown in different regions, and they have different characteristics and flavors and tastes. So we need to be knowledgeable enough that we don't make ourselves look stupid when we don't understand that. Most common ones, and we use some abbreviations here. It's important that you use these same abbreviations as far as possible, so that we don't get a messy master list where there's no sort of standardization. But Chardonnay we just call Chard. Pinot Grigio we call PG. So don't make the mistake of putting Pinot, because there is Pinot Grigio, a white wine, and there's Pinot Noir, a red wine. So obviously we use PG and PN. So Cabernet Sauvignon CS. Mentioned it, Pinot Noir, we use PN. If in doubt, go ahead and just scan the existing products in the master list, and you'll see the conventions used there. It's important that you've got to kind of follow the lead of the existing master list, so we don't have 3 different names used for Cabernet. So we don't have, CS, Cabernet Sauvignon, Cab. We just use CS. So the vintage of the year is a fancy word used to refer to the year in which the wine was made. This is particularly important for high-end wines. High-end wines will typically have a different barcode each year, because there's a lot of, once you get into the nuance of wine, the year it comes can affect the taste quite a lot. Generally speaking, this is not something we're paying attention to, because most of our clients are focused on sort of more value-oriented wines, maybe up to I don't know, maybe $15 a bottle, something like that might be a price point where you start to think about vintage. But if vintage isn't prominently marked, it's probably not going to distinguish. And the lower end market, like Barefoot or most of the wines that honestly you're probably familiar with, unless you're a real wine geek, they don't typically list the year on them, and it means that the barcode will not change year by year, meaning that they're just not emphasizing this vintage. So I said typically it's for the higher end stuff. Finally, miscellaneous. Anything that isn't draft beer, bottled beer, wine, or liquor goes in misc. There's a lot more variety here. It could be everything from a soda to a pre-mixed Bloody Mary mix to mixers or like a pre-made margarita mix. We're not typically tracking these products, but we will track them for for clients if they specifically ask for them. And there's every variation of size you can think of here. The subcategories here include soda, hydration, so like Gatorade, vitamin water, water still in sparkling, mixers like mentioned that sour mixers, juices like orange juice, retail for things like t-shirts, everything, cigarettes if we track those. Okay, that's it. Next we're going to go into products versus vessels. That'll be a new video.